USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Learn more and get a quote at usaa.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
Hello and welcome to The Shift, the podcast that aims to tell the no-holds-barred truth about being a woman post-40. Created and hosted by me, writer and broadcaster, Sam Baker. My guest this week is the novelist Betsy Lerner. Now, Betsy is here to talk about her critically acclaimed debut novel, Shred Sisters, which takes us from the 1970s to the 1990s and tells the story of two troubled sisters, Amy and Ollie. No less a legend than Patti Smith described it as moving like a souped-up pickup truck. And who am I to argue with Patti? It does. I loved it. But Betsy only turned to fiction in her early 60s. Before that, she had a prolific career in the publishing industry spanning 30 years as an editor and literary agent, working on such classics as Prozac Nation, Autobiography of a Face, and Just Kids. And she hasn't stopped there. Betsy has also built a large following on TikTok, where she shares passages from her diaries, or the chronicles of disappointment, depression and loneliness, as she calls them, that she kept in her 20s when she was cycling through the highs and lows of bipolar disorder.
I really just can't believe how terrible I felt, and some of the situations, dangerous situations I put myself in with terrible men and the friendships I wrecked. But I try to find these nuggets that I think will relate, be relatable to kids in their 20s.
Betsy joined me to talk about sibling rivalry, aging, heartbreak, and the family secret that shaped her. We also discussed escaping the maternal mantle of judgment, or as she puts it brilliantly, inheriting that scoreboard in the sky. I love that. Her personal mission to destigmatise mental illness, disordered eating, gratitude, and why she absolutely loved her 20-somethings on TikTok. Can I just say I absolutely love Shred Sisters?
Oh, thank you.
I love it. I love it. And one of the things I loved most about it was the fact that it doesn't feel to me like it fits the publishing stereotypes. It's not like big saga. It's not dramatic. It's not lots of showing and action. And it's also not pretentious.
I appreciate that. As a person with an MFA in poetry, I but not writing poetry for 40-something years, I think I've tried to wipe out all preciousness in my writing and in my author's writing as well.
Tell me about how old were you when you did the MFA?
I was 25, 26. I took a few years. I didn't take a few years off out of college. I couldn't get into graduate school when I finished college. So, and I couldn't get a publishing job either because I couldn't pass a typing test back in those days on a Selectric typewriter.
Yeah.
So I took a stopgap job and I worked as a corporate file coordinator in an investment bank. It was a nightmare, but I did over that time put a portfolio of poems together, and I then got into an MFA program. So I'm a late bloomer.
So what was it that made you, having studied poetry, why did you step away from it?
It's almost like the spigot just turned off. I wrote diaries every day of my life. I wrote tons of poems, and it meant the world to me, reading poetry. I was sort of a closeted poet. Even when I went to graduate school, I never imagined that I would be a poet. I never imagined I would be published. That was sort of for other people. And I knew when I graduated that I desperately needed a full-time job, and I needed health benefits. I needed to pay for therapy. I needed to pay my rent. I latched on to publishing. I worked for a literary agent as a part-time job while I was in graduate school, and I really, really liked it. And when I got into publishing, I just immediately attached to every aspect of it. I loved being writer adjacent. I loved editing, learning the craft of editing. And so my own desire for writing and my own interest in it, I could say it faded, or I could say I sublimated it. Both would be true.
So you've been on all three sides of the publishing divide. That's not the right word, really. Editor, agent, and writer. Where do you feel most comfortable?
I'm getting more comfortable writing, saying I'm a writer, even though I've written my entire life. If you met me on a plane, I would say I'm a literary agent, because that is my official day job. But within that job, I most love doing the editorial work. I do love selling. I'm sort of a born salesman. I love creating enthusiasm for projects. I love marketing. I love coming up with hooks and titles and jackets. I love all of that. But really, when I sit down and edit something and the author loves the work and takes the edits, and we, feel we've married in a way our ideas about what the book should be, I still find that deeply gratifying.
So what was it? I mean, you've written nonfiction. What was it made you decide, I suppose, in your early 60s to write fiction?
So not a decision, just one night during COVID. I was watching the movie Inception with my daughter and my husband, and I couldn't follow the plot. And I sort of said after 20 minutes, I'm out. And I went in the other room, I opened my laptop, and I wrote the first words of the novel as they still appear. Here are the ways I could start this story. It's just thinking out loud. I just started to write it. And the more I did, the more I wanted to do. I started getting up earlier and earlier and writing for longer hours. And it flowed out of me over 7 months. It was like writing a wave, that I didn't know where it came from. I didn't know where it was going. I didn't tell anyone I was doing it. Only my husband knew, because he heard me getting up at 5 a.m. If a writer said that to me, oh, it just happened, it just poured out of me, I would just think, oh, bullshit. But that is what happened. Now, it did take 1.5 years to revise it and to get it into the shape that I was able to sell it. So it's not like I got away with anything by writing it so fast. It was all inside me. That's clear.
Because it has, it's absolutely fiction, but it does have some autobiographical elements, doesn't it? Do you think maybe you were at a point in your life where there was some stuff that needed to come out?
I had written 2 memoirs previously, one quite a long time ago called Food and Loathing, about the intersection of disordered eating, a lifetime of that. And that's the food part. And the loathing part is my experience being bipolar. So I thought that I'd got it out of my system, so to speak. And then, 8 years later, I wrote a book about my mother's bridge club. And it was really about my rift with I didn't get along with my mother for my entire life. And then in her 80s and in my 50s, we actually found each other, over the course of my reporting the lives of these 5 women. So I thought I got that out of my system. I really didn't think I had another book in me. In fact, I started co-writing with one of my authors, some of her science books, and I loved doing that, actually. So yeah, it was all there, but I didn't know I could tap it. I didn't know I could write fiction. I didn't really have any interest in writing fiction. I only represent nonfiction writers. And for pleasure, I mostly read nonfiction. I mean, I still read poetry, and I love language deeply. And I approach anything anybody writes aesthetically and for the writing itself. Yeah, it did take me back. I should also say that I've also written a lot of screenplays. So I think I had a lot of experience with plot. Screenplays were my first love. I also blogged for a decade, and I wrote all those diaries. So I think over 40 years or more, I was developing a very personal writing voice, which is definitely the voice of Amy in the book.
Yeah, I've spent a very happy couple of hours reading your blogs today. And you do, I can see the similarity with Amy's voice, but yeah, it's interesting. So when was the screenwriting in all this?
I went to NYU Film School. It was not
before
what
the
it was.
Poetry.
Yeah, for my freshman year of college and my first year, and I got invited to leave. And so but they didn't kick me out of college, thank goodness. And I went and I got my English degree. My professor actually said, before you try to make movies, you should go read a few books and learn some things about the world. And I didn't want to hear that, but I did that. Got my degree in English. As I said, eventually went to graduate school for poetry, started working in publishing. At 40, I audited a screenwriting class at Yale where my husband was working, opened up a whole world of writing for me. I found I loved the form. It actually reminded me of poetry because you have to use as few words as possible to describe people and set tone and all of that. I just loved it. And my very first screenplay was picked up by a very big deal producer who worked with me for an entire summer over 7 drafts. It was like a masterclass. And then when the actor he wanted to work with declined, he just dropped it and dropped me, and that was over.
Oh,
but
man.
It was enough of a nibble of what my dream that I wrote another, and then I had another nibble. So it never came to pass, but I kept writing them because I just found it so much fun, and I had so many stories that I could access. I'm an idea person. I come up with at least one idea a day, and usually I give them to other people, or they're bad ideas. They're not all viable, but so that's where that came from, and I definitely think it enabled me to write plot. It taught me about plot in a way that I think many writers get stuck, either in the middle of the book or even just getting started. They can achieve tone, they can create a character, but what happens?
So you said that you were invited to leave when you were at college. What had you done?
First of all, NYU Film School was just a fledgling program at the time, and you didn't have to submit much to get in. And I submitted some little Super 8 movies that I made, and I don't know, I guess they needed students, but the other students had been making films all through high school, and they were quite good. And it was clear to me from the outset that I only had a Super 8 film. I knew nothing about editing. I didn't have a big film vocabulary. I had watched movies I loved, but I wasn't a serious cinemaphile or anything like that. And everyone else around me was. I was clearly the weak link in the program. And all of my movies started with 360-degree pans. And I remember the professor said, I don't know if this is your personal style, but it frankly makes me want to throw up. So it was brutal. It was brutal. It was NYU. I was in the village. I was free finally of my horrible suburban upbringing. And I was not that serious a student. I found my very first boyfriend. I would say that I majored in him mostly. And then the heartbreak of him breaking up with me. I was a good student in high school, but it was easy. And somehow all the challenges of being on my own, and I just wasn't good. They were right to invite me to leave. And then I did take my studies very seriously. That put the fear of God in me. And I was one of the few people who read all the books in all of our courses and did all the homework. And I actually spent a year in London. That was a formative year. I had the most incredible professors, and they required we think for ourselves, which in America, my experience was they just wanted you to sort of vomit back. They taught you and to write a 5-paragraph essay, and it's all very formulaic. And in the UK, the professors challenged us to think for ourselves and read criticism, read T.S. Eliot's criticism. It was all a fantastic experience for me, and was really formative.
So what year were you in London?
It was 81. There was a lot going on. The New Musical Express had just started, and ID magazine, and oh my goodness, we went to so many concerts, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, I was really lonely actually, but I was happy to be lonely there. It's a great city to be lonely in. You just get a bus pass, and I'd ride the top of the bus for hours smoking and writing in my diary. Very romantic.
Because it's the diaries that have made you TikTok famous, isn't it?
Yes.
When did you first start keeping a diary?
When I was around 10 years old. I had read Anne Frank's Diary of a Young Girl. The intimacy with which she spoke into her diary appealed to me so deeply. I felt very isolated in my family, and I knew something was very wrong, but I didn't really know what. I had a sister who had died, and my parents put all the pictures away and never spoke of her. I think that was very haunting. I was 4 years old when it happened. And I think I spent a lot of my teens and 20s trying to sort of either follow her into the grave or make my parents talk. And I couldn't do either at the end of the day, but a lot of my poetry was about that. And so I started keeping a diary at a very young age. And it's funny because a lot of it was complaining about my older sister, who I then, of course, wrote a book about sisters. But yeah, I kept them all through high school and all through my 20s.
So, like you say, the Shred Sisters is about sisters and sisterhood and the sister knot and the kind of complicated love, hate, best person, worst person-ness of being a sister. You were the middle sister, weren't you?
Yes.
How much did that shape you as a person, do you think, being the one in the middle?
I think it shaped me tremendously, but it was also in our house a kind of, because my sister died, so I was the baby, then she was born, I was the middle. Then when she died, I was the baby again. And then 10 years later, they had another girl. So I was thrown back into being the middle, and it was all very confusing. And after my sister died, my family sort of split right in the middle. I aligned completely with my dad and my older sister completely with my mom. When the baby came, I felt I was just completely displaced. How old was I? 14. I just didn't know what to do with all that. And then and I never got along with my older sister. And then I became very close with my younger sister, who's also a writer. And my older sister and I really became like a second mother to her because we were so much older. But sibling rivalry, sibling relationships, sibling love, it all dominated so much of my life. My mother always wished we would get along. It always pained her that we didn't get along. And all the pressure she put on us when we were such different people. And then this whole family dynamic after the death was so difficult to navigate. But it was actually, then during the pandemic, and I'm not sure if you've read, but my younger sister had a terrible tragedy in her family with her teenagers being killed by a drunk driver.
Awful. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that it's just 6 years ago this week, actually. And we came together over that and learned to help each other and put all our differences aside. It was so devastating. And that's also what was going on when I wrote the book. All that was happening. We also used to, when the pandemic hit and we couldn't physically be with my sister, she was in LA, we started working out over FaceTime every morning, doing burpees and, squats and all this with some, YouTube instructor. But we called it shredding. Term for working out, and we started calling ourselves the Shred Sisters. Are we shredding tomorrow? What time are we shredding? Again, it's not too hard to figure out what was happening in my life. As you notice, there are a number of people who die in the book. I think I don't like the word processing so much, but I think that was all filtering through me.
This episode of The Shift is sponsored by Shopify. When I think back to starting The Shift, I can hardly believe I pulled it off. I mean, I knew nothing, and I had to figure it all out on my own. Scripts, scheduling, branding. When you're starting something new, it can seem like every time you tick something off your to-do list, 2 more things magically appear in their place. So finding a tool that simplifies the whole process can be a real game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names like Heinz to Allbirds and Skims. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify will help you build an online store to match your brand style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful tools to write product descriptions, headlines, and enhance product photography. Get the word out like you actually have a marketing team to create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from inventory to international shipping to processing returns, you name it. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your £1 a month trial at shopify.co.uk/shift. Go to shopify.co.uk/shift. At what point, because the elder sister character, Ollie, is bipolar, and you were bipolar, weren't you, as a teenager and a young woman? Would you mind talking a bit about that?
I was diagnosed when I was 15. Sort of like in the book, my parents took me to a psychologist. They tricked me into going. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know that there was bipolar in my family history, which my parents never divulged, even as we were all sitting there with a psychiatrist telling me that I was bipolar.
Oh, man.
Then they put me on medication. I was already a big pot smoker. I hated how the medication made me feel. So I started flushing it down the toilet, not telling them. Really, for the next 15 years, let's say age 15 to 30, I was cycling. I was much more depressive with shorter bursts of mania, usually in the spring and summer. I was kind of a classic cycler. In the book, Ollie is hypomanic. So she's charismatic, and I made her gorgeous and athletic and highly sexualized. She crashes intermittently, but she's mostly hypomanic. So her mania is very different than mine, but I certainly do know the experience inside out, having dealt with it personally and gravitated to all the mentally ill poets and writers and artists. And then as an older person, reading really all the science and neurobiology about the illness. So I tried very hard to describe what it's like without sensationalizing it, which I do often find certainly in movies. The bipolar person is always so crazy and out of control. In fact, there's a British TV show called Big Mood. I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I've never even heard of it.
Big Mood, and it stars the young actress from Bridgerton. I always forget her name. Coughlin, I think.
Oh, Nicola Coughlan.
Nicola Coughlan. Okay, she plays a bipolar character. It is the first depiction on the screen that I have ever seen that feels 100% true to me.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah. So excellent. She's not off the charts manic, but her depressions are very dark. Her ideation, her quickness, her manipulation, her inability to see herself clearly, which is one of the hallmarks of bipolar illnesses, right? You're like the last to know when you're manic because you're so manic, and how it in fact impacts her closest relationships, how they get destroyed. Anyway, it's quite good.
So you said you cycled pretty much through 15 to 30. How did you come through it? Because it never goes, does it? It's more about...
No, it's about managing it. Over those years, I was put on all kinds of medications. I did constantly go for therapy. I knew something was very wrong. I was very unhappy. I had a lot of suicidal ideation. I was hospitalized at one point for 6 months, which was, incredibly traumatic period. But I left that hospital with the incorrect diagnosis and not the right medication. And I was very fortunate that one of my professors in graduate school referred me to her psychopharmacologist. And I went to him. He said I was bipolar. He put me on medicine, and I felt better right away. And I went off the meds and I stopped seeing him, as people often do. But then I think I had a miscarriage, and I went into one of the worst spiraling depressions of my life. And I went back to him, and he said, I'm only going to work with you if you stay on the medication, but I'm going to medicate you a little differently than other doctors. When you take lithium, you have to have your bloods checked every few months because you have to have a certain amount of medicine at your blood level. And let's say you're supposed to be between a 6 and an 8. He would keep me at a 5. And it just somehow, I was able to still feel like myself, still be creative, but it put a floor and a ceiling. It gave me those two things. Once I stayed on my medication, and that's also when I had my daughter. So I was very motivated and very frightened that I would have a horrible postpartum as my mother did. The only drawback was I couldn't nurse. I had to go right back on the medication right after I gave birth. And I did not mess around with that. I didn't have a postpartum. And I've never had an episode of either mania or depression ever since, but I've stayed on my medicine. I see my doctor 2 or 3 times a year, get my bloods done. I am absolutely religious about my stability, my gratitude for it. Those 15 years in that hospitalization were no fun. I'm grateful I have my life, and I'm grateful I found my doctor. He works with a lot of creative people, and he does not medicate the way most people do by the numbers. He gets to know the person. I mean, he's not interested in your behavior. He's interested in your brain. He's a brain guy. I've sent a lot of people to him, and some of them say he has no bedside manner. And I'm like, don't worry about that.
Yeah. That's not the most important thing here.
Go to your therapist for the love.
Yeah.
But go to my doctor for the right meds. And so many writers I know have done so well going to him.
Was it tough going back into the weeds a bit to write Ollie?
Not so much. I really have fun writing, and I really love making myself cry and, hoping I'm making the reader cry. I mean, I don't mean to sound like I'm a sociopath or anything, but I really do enjoy that. I must say, reading my diaries for my TikTok, like I just read about 15 or 20 pages that I've not read on TikTok because they're too dark and too upsetting. And I did get very upset reading them. I really just can't believe how terrible I felt. And some of the situations, dangerous situations I put myself in with terrible men, and the friendships I wrecked. And, reading about all that is very hard. But I try to find these nuggets that I think will relate, be relatable to kids in their 20s, who's my audience, really.
Did it surprise you the way your experience, 40 years ago resonated with, kids in their late teens, 20s now?
I'm so pleased that it does, but I'm not surprised. It's always been my philosophy that no matter how much technology the world can throw at us, no matter how much AI, just holding hands for the first time is such a profound experience. And that never changes. And your first kiss, your first attempts at lovemaking and all of that stuff. I mean, that's just human to human. And they're all rites of passage. And I don't think any of that changes. How we die, the really essential things in life, we haven't figured out a way to make any be easier or better. They are scary, big things and tremendous to experience. And, most people in their 20s do not feel they have the tools. And there's just so much pressure to succeed in whatever it is that you do. Nobody thinks that, I have a post going viral right now that has shocked me because it's not that different from my other posts. But the message is you feel like you have no time, but you have all the time in the world. If somebody told me that in my 20s, I wouldn't have believed them. But then the little diary thing sort of shows that there is time. I don't know, but it's been an incredible response to this post. I mean, all the kids are saying, I'm 22, I'm 23, I feel this way. I feel I have no future. I feel I've wasted my life, which is how I felt in my 20s.
Yeah.
It's just how you have to go through it.
It's so interesting you say that because when Melissa Phoebos was on the podcast, she said something really similar about you are right where you need to be. You don't need to worry about that kind of constant, I should be there. I should have proved this by now. I should have attained that by there. That resonated so much with listeners. And I feel like we can see it now, but what difference would it have made to be able to see it then?
Right, because it's all the only thing you get from getting older is perspective. And you cannot have that when you're young. You're not privy to that. And instead you see this one getting married and this one having a baby and this one getting a house, and you don't have any of that. You might even be one, young person said, I was just fired from my federal job and I'm back at my parents' house. I feel like a zero. How do I come back from this? Well, what people don't realize is it's from your lowest, worst times that you grow the most. And so many of those people who got married at 24 and had their baby and had their house or their big career, by the time they're in their 40s, they're divorced, they're fired, they're, but you don't know that. I mentioned my hospitalization. It was the lowest point in my life. And most important, I'm the compassionate, empathic person that I am because of it. I don't fear mental illness anymore. I got so much stronger, not right away. It took a long time to build my life back from that experience, but it's absolutely one of the foundations of my mental health. So yeah, it's hard to tell a person going through massive heartbreak that their capacity for love is so great and they will find it again, because that's what heartbreak is, right? It's about your capacity for love. It's way better to be heartbroken than not heartbroken, to have that passion and experience. I think anyway.
Did reading your diaries, putting them on TikTok, did that give you more compassion for yourself?
Yeah, I think so, a little bit. I don't walk around like looking for a lot of self-love or compassion. I'm way too like compulsive and driven, but I've definitely, all the negative messaging that I got from my mother, all the criticism, all that stuff, it's still with me. I'll never entirely shake it, but it doesn't drag me down anymore. I acknowledge it. I've changed as much as I think I can through therapy and worked on myself. But now I'm sort of like, what do I really have to prove? I think that's also why I wrote the novel. I was free enough to write it. Nobody wanted it. No one asked for it. It didn't matter if I didn't finish it or didn't stay with it. Like I said, I love writing that project. I have many stalled projects in all of my notebooks, as most of us do. I call them orphans. I just wrote 20 pages and left the poor thing. But this thing just, caught fire for me. I'll even tell you at one point I thought, am I manic? Like, what is going on? Why am I writing this furiously? And I went to my doctor and I talked to him about it. And he said, you seem really good to me. I think you just caught a lucky wind. That's how I think about it now.
Yeah, then grab that wind and use it. Question it. I read an interview that you did when your book about your mother's friendship circle came out, about moving to live near your mum when she was ill. And I'm sure it was, as you know what journalists are like, I'm sure it was like you said it in the context of something and it was like taken out and put in the headline. But you said something about you moved closer to her and it sent you into therapy. That kind of, and also there's a line in the Shred Sisters when the mother dies. Amy says that she'd inherited her mother's mantle of judgment and her scoreboard in the sky. It's that mother-daughter conflict where you've got an inner critic and the voice is your mother's. That's really problematic, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I once heard an interview with Shirley Temple. You remember the little curly-haired dancing girl? And I guess she had many husbands. They all left her. They took her money, a horrible life. And the interviewer said, how is it you remain so buoyant and have such an optimistic outlook? And she said, well, I was bathed in love as a child. And I thought, bathed in love? I was bathed in criticism, and I really made a lot of sense to me. When you say internalize all that, I completely did. But in the end, when I grew close to my mother through the bridge game and all of that, I just forgave her, and I maybe forgave, myself some of it. I'm still very self-critical. I always want to do better and always critiquing everything that I do, but I'm also living. I'm living much more. I think I'm much more accepting, let's put it that way.
Of yourself.
Yeah, this is it, Yeah. I'm not going to be a size 2. And I'm not going to get a Pulitzer Prize, and
this time.
This time, I feel like I've been a really good mom. I feel like I've been a good, partner. I have a handful of very close friends scattered all over the world. I feel I've mentored a lot of people. There are a lot of things I'm very proud of, but I'm a work in progress. But one of the things I've really learned is, as a child, I loved solitude and I love it now. And so I am trying to protect my time a little bit more, have more boundaries. I really love writing and I love being quiet after I write. Like, I don't like socializing that much. So, and I, always pushed myself to do all that stuff because I thought I had to. I needed people to like me. I needed to be needed. That's why I think I loved being an editor and being an agent. All it is about serving other people's needs. And that kept me very connected to the earth and to the world. And I'm grateful for all the people who needed me. But I want to shift. I think writing Shred Sisters showed me, I can actually, all those screenplay ideas, all the ideas that I have, maybe I can write them as fiction. And we'll see.
Yeah, maybe you can do it for yourself instead of just helping other people do it. Not that that's in any way less, it's just different.
It's just different. Yeah, it's just different. And I really did need them. I needed people I needed the work. Work is a big part of my stability, no doubt about it.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? Well, with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills. Wait, did I say job title yet? Get started today and see how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
I read you saying that it's your deeply held belief that people don't change all that much. In fact, time reveals who they are and often they get worse, which really made me laugh. It's slightly depressing, but probably true. What about you? Do you think you've changed much?
In some ways, I've changed a great deal because I went from being a very unstable person to a solid citizen. That's a big change. I went from never thinking I would have my own family, to having my own family. So that's a huge change. I always thought I would live in a studio apartment for the rest of my life by myself, and I have my own home. And so, yeah, I was capable of enormous changes. But the essential Betsy is very much the same. Self-judgment, my judgment about others, my feeling about my place in the world is still really quite small. A lot of people turned down Shred Sisters because they felt that Amy didn't change by the end of the book. And that rankled me, because I thought, first of all, they mean change for the better. When people say you need to change, it means for the better, obviously. But
and what they think is better as well.
Very good point. Very, very good point. But when I met with the editor who was interested in talking about the book with me, and I said, I don't believe in this, change nonsense. And she's thought about it and she said, well, Betsy, Amy doesn't have to change, but she needs to learn. And that was the key for me. I was able to look at each scene and see, this scene set Amy back. This interaction helped Amy move forward, and I looked at everyone that way. And I think by the end of the book, Amy hasn't changed that much, but she's learned a lot about herself. And I hope the reader feels she's maybe on her way to putting a life together that would be meaningful for her. So yeah, I've learned. I
really like that way of looking at it. I think that gives you a lot more scope as well. It's interestingly, for this current season, I had a conversation with Jennifer Weiner, and she had a very similar but different experience, but because all of the editors she spoke to wanted her character to change. And obviously the change they wanted was weight loss.
Yeah, I listened to that.
Oh, did you? Oh, well, fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that, she could learn a lot, but she didn't have to become a size 8 to do it.
Yeah, she wanted to keep it real. I've always respected her for speaking out about it. I mean, I struggled with with disordered eating, as we now call it, my whole life. And so she's a hero by fighting back against, all of that. She and I don't know, I think I'm a little older than she is, but we definitely grew up under the, Oprah, the reign of Oprah, from pulling a wagon out on stage with, a pile of literal fat, watching her do Slim Fast and Weight Watchers and now Ozempic. I mean, she really, that's a story. That's an article no one has really written, is the Oprah weight loss. But Jennifer has addressed it. I think she's awesome.
Yeah, I think there was a program, I don't know whether it was late 80s, maybe 90s in the UK, and I'm not going to be able to remember what it was called. And it had a doctor, I think she was called Dr. Gillian something. And the beginning of every program, she would basically get a fat person to show her what they ate every week. And she would put it all out on a table. I mean, it was the most gross, shaming thing. And it came, that kind of came on the heels of, well, growing up. I mean, I'm about maybe 5 years younger than you. And I think Jennifer Weiner is maybe 5 years younger than me. And it came on the heels of, Jane Fonda and the F Plan and just diet after diet after diet after diet.
Yeah. In America, we also, I think maybe a decade or more ago, we had the Largest Loser program where they would have a cohort of obese people be trained by this like ruthless workout trainer and humiliate them on air. And it's so painful. I finally started to deal with it in a healthy way when I read a book called Intuitive Eating, which really says that it's the fat culture and culture of shame and that has, destroyed most of our psyches, and that the body actually does know satiation and you just have to give it a chance to reset and not diet, really don't diet and put the scale away and all kinds of other radical things, which I've done. And, I don't know what I weigh, but I actually feel good. I know I'm not skinny, but I feel so much better in my body. And I don't equate myself with the number on the scale anymore. That and talk about change. I mean, that's been liberation for me.
I mean, the way that your personal value and the entire way your day is going to go could be influenced by that number every morning. Yeah.
I loved an interview with Emma Thompson where she said, whatever you do, don't diet.
Yeah. It's tough, isn't it?
Yeah. And this culture is so punishing.
In a minute, I'm going to ask you the questions that I always ask at the end, but I just want to ask you one more thing. Well, I actually want to ask you 100 more things, but I'm not going to do that. On your blog, I noticed that you annually posted a hate list. Tell me what's on your hate list right now. I'm going to copy it, by the way.
Trump, the war in Ukraine, the war in the Middle East, the murdering of our legislators, murdering of our children. I mean, the hate list on my blog is always a goof, it's new expressions that people use like journey and process and space, the nonfiction space. I hate jargon. So those are the things I write about in my blog. But right now the world is on fire and it does not feel good to be an American, which is a horrible, horrible thing to feel. Yeah, I can't answer that in my usual silly way, like Nicole wigs and things like that. It's too frivolous.
Before we go to the questions that I always ask, is there anything that you would like to tell us or say about the Shred Sisters that you feel like we haven't covered?
The only thing I would like to say that I talk openly about my mental illness, and I tried to really create an honest depiction of a person with bipolar illness. And I do it because I was so shamed and stigmatized in my teens and 20s, and beyond that by my parents. And when I got well, I never told anybody because I feared that it would compromise my integrity. And I still felt a lot of shame about it. And so in my 50s and 60s, I have liberated myself to talk about it openly because I really do want to destigmatize it as much as possible. And it's not that I'm proud of it. It's something I've had to live with, and I'd rather not have to have lived with it. But having lived with it, I think it's just very important to be honest about it. Some people say, how can you talk about this so openly? And I've just decided, how can I not?
And that's what's got you over 1 million likes on TikTok. Okay. So what is your emotional age?
15, 25, somewhere in there.
Why?
I'm very young at heart. I'm very young at heart. I love my 20-somethings on TikTok. I love them. I go to every new movie. I love new music, pop music. Yeah, I feel very young.
What are you listening to right now?
Well, I always listen to an audiobook, and the one I'm listening to right now is called Detransition Baby.
I love that. She's been on.
Oh, really? Oh, I'll have to look that one up. Wow. I'm blown away. I am blown away. I've read a few other novels about, transition, and this is by far the most intimate and hilarious and moving. Yeah, I'm really impressed.
And what book would you push on a friend? What would you recommend? Can be anything at all. It's a British author. I have to look at my shelf. Do you mind if I look at my shelf? No, go for it.
I can't find it. It's called Loved and Missed.
Susie Boyd.
Tremendous book. A mother-daughter book also. Mother-daughter, granddaughter even, but mostly mother-daughter addiction. Just loved the voice, loved the subtlety in it. You could say not much happens in that book, but the emotional upheaval in it is so amazing. Really, really like that book. I feel like we've covered lots of this really over our conversation, but I'll ask you anyway. What advice would you give younger women? Read Intuitive Eating if you are struggling with that bullshit. Keep a diary, get therapy if you need it. I'm not going to say things like believe in yourself, but believe in yourself. Don't give yourself away. Understand your value and your worth. So much stuff that you learn, isn't it? Yeah. As you get older. Appreciate your youth. They're never going to do that. I mean, when I look at some of these young women walking in New York, and they look so great, and they're just in their lives in their 20s and 30s and they're working. And I don't know, I just think, wow, that's such a great time to be in New York. And when you have energy and curiosity, hopefully that'll take you to really good places. Do you feel like you missed out on that a bit? Totally. Yeah. I was so depressed. I still could fake it a lot of the time, but my friends weren't real friends. And it took me a long time to get all that together. I can't imagine what I would have been like if I hadn't struggled with all that. I just don't know, but I don't know. I'm happy how it all turned out. Honestly, it sucked. You don't want to spend your 20s wanting to die. It's like, if you can just try to avoid that. Who is an older woman who's inspired you? Well, when I went to college, I cared for this much older woman in her 90s. It was part of this, you got some credit for visiting village neighbors. And her name was Nanette Blanc. And she started the Little Red Schoolhouse. And she had one great love on a ship, and he died. And she devoted herself to education and art. She was a shut-in when I met her, but she was extraordinary. And she was a huge role model to me. And my grandmother was as well. Very kind person who had struggled a great deal, fled the Cossacks as a young girl in Russia and came to America and learned English and got therapy to deal with her trauma. She was very forward thinking. Those two women when I was young meant a great deal to me. What's your superpower? My superpower, I think it's that I'm very compulsive. I never quit. I don't quit. I just keep pushing myself, my clients. I always want more for everyone. My mother always said it was my liability. She always said, you don't quit. And then I realized, oh no, actually, I'm a fighter. Yeah, it's often the two sides of the same coin, isn't it? Yeah. And last one, how many fucks do you give? How many fucks do I give? I don't give a fuck. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy The Shift and would like to show your appreciation, why not buy me a coffee? Go to www.buymeacoffee.com/The Shift with Sam Baker. You can hear a new episode of The Shift every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you like what you hear, please do rate, review, follow, tell your friends, because it really does help other people find us. And if you'd like to know more about my own experience of shifting, my book, The Shift, How I Lost and Found Myself After 40, and you can too, is out now in paperback.
This episode is brought to you by FX's Alien Earth, the official podcast. Each week, host Adam Rogers is joined by guests, including the show's creator, cast, and crew, in this exclusive companion podcast. They will explore story elements, deep dive into character motivations, and offer an episode-by-episode behind-the-scenes breakdown of each terrifying chapter in this new series. Search FX's Alien Earth wherever you listen to podcasts.
Want to live better?
We've got a lot of work to do.
Join Chris Hemsworth in National Geographic's new Disney Plus original series, Limitless. Live better now.
I'm diving headfirst into cutting-edge science to uncover 3 powerful secrets to living better right now. The growth that occurs through any challenging experience is really what we seek.
Chris Hemsworth stars in Limitless. Live better now. Now streaming on Disney Plus and Hulu.
It's showtime.